But Take One is a great podcast. It's up right now at WLSAM.com. It's hosted by our next guest, obviously, Bill Cameron, who's the Dean of City Hall Reporters, Emeritus. Still involved in the industry. He tried to get out, but he got sucked back in. And Paul Vallas is his guest today. Here's Paul Vallas on Brandon Johnson's propensity for meetings.
I still think that they're kind of like, wandering around trying to figure out what to do. And I think it's reflected in the fact that he's had very few meetings with his cabinet, that he has been slow to appoint new people. And I think it's reflected in the fact that we really haven't seen a series of kind of like immediate actions.
You can listen to the entire podcast on our podcast page. Paul Vallas, not that impressed with Brandon Johnson's first 100 days.
Mayors always come in, and you always have these 100-day plans to deal with emerging issues or issues of immediate importance. And I have not seen that on the part of the mayor. Meanwhile, in the last 100 days, we've had, or I should say since the election, we've had something like 200 murders. We've had 2,000 robberies. We've had 300 carjackings. We've had 7,000 vehicles stolen.
Not impressed, Paul Vallas. We'll get back to that subject, but let's start with Bill Cameron. Bill, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good, John. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in and hanging on. I wanted to get your take. Are you surprised by the Mapes verdict?
No. The defense that he just, had a faulty memory was ridiculous, right?
Have you had any memorable interactions with him, McLean, or Madigan that you can talk to us about?
I haven't. I only saw him up on the dais of the House on many an occasion as I was covering the House over the years. But he was a pretty secretive guy. What you should know, we should give a shout-out to Ray Long of the Tribune, because It was his reporting several years ago in the Me Too scandal in Springfield that led to this conviction on other charges against Tim Mapes.
And Mapes got cashiered at that time as Madigan's chief of staff.
That's right.
And then he was still involved in the loop, in the triangle power between Madigan at the top of the triangle, McLean, and then Mapes. He knew of all the efforts to essentially insulate Madigan from being affected by that scandal, and that's what's given him now a potential 25-year sentence. What do you anticipate he will do before April?
Good question. Usually these folks, I remember one committed suicide in the Blagojevich case.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a time of how am I going to cope with this? And will I get a tough sentence just because the judge in the umpteenth case of political corruption in Illinois wants to deter future activity like this and give me a terrible sentence? Now, there is one thing that surprises me, John, and that is that despite all these convictions, people still plot corruption where there are open microphones.
Yeah, it's clearly not a deterrent, that's for sure.
It's crazy. They should know better, but they just keep stealing or plotting. And I guess it's, as Paul Vallas says in this show, it's just the hubris of these longtime leaders of the regular Democratic organization.
But in this case, there weren't bags of money necessarily used, at least in the Mapes trial. It was just that he lied to the feds about, did he know about the efforts to insulate Madigan? And he said, no, I don't know anything about that, the Lou Lang incident, what have you. And he was caught on wiretaps with a contrary story, so that's it. But out of all the hundreds of questions, I'm not really sticking up for him, but his defense, they had a relatively decent defense, I thought. When you ask somebody a couple hundred questions, and then it's like, well, we caught you lying on 7. It's like, well, I'm going on 70 years old, hey. It's not as sharp as I used to be. I wonder what kind of sentence the judge will hand down. It's potentially 25 years.
Well, I think he'll probably get more than 5, less than 10. That's my guess.
And then if he's feathered his nest, same thing with McLean and maybe even Madigan, at that point do they say, you know what, it's been a good run for us. We'll take our time, but we're not going to roll over.
Yeah, I think the loyalty still to Madigan is such that a guy like Tim Mapes still will take the fall for Madigan, although the guilty verdicts after only 5 hours of deliberations, not a good sign for Mike Madigan.
Well, McLean's already been found guilty, and he has another trial along with Madigan in April.
That's right.
He's looking at heavy time.
Also, it doesn't look good for Ed Burke, who goes to trial
No.
this fall. So, I mean, we've seen this movie before, John, many times over many years, over many decades, really. But, reform never takes hold. I remember the last time we had one of these, the new Speaker of the House appointed a committee to effectuate reforms, and I think the governor was in support of that as well. But all of the recommendations expired, don't you know?
And then with all these trials, all the way back, and again, kudos to Ray Long for breaking this out of the Me Too scandal in Madigan's office. But patient zero here in all of these scandals, it's a former Alderman Solis with his wire. They got at least 2, maybe even 3 of these trials started.
Right. I mean, and they just don't think they're going to get caught, but when they do, so often they're on tape and they're just dead in the water. My own suspicion over the years was there are so many others getting away with it that, individuals think they can get away with it too.
I talked earlier with a former colleague of yours. We had a little discussion about Paul Powell, too. Scott Reeder, the Illinois Times, is on just after 4 o'clock discussing finding $750,000 in your hotel room in Springfield.
Yeah. And that's all we knew about.
And I didn't know until talking to Scott that Paul Powell died in a hotel room in Rochester, Minnesota, with a woman not his wife. I didn't know that part of the story until today.
Endless angles on Paul Powell.
Are you writing a book? Are you writing a memoir?
Well, I tried to, and I don't think I have the talent for it. I might have a magazine article, but I'm in such awe of people like Ray Long, who literally wrote the book on Madigan. It's a discipline more attuned to a newspaper reporter who can fill in hundreds of pages of context, and me doing 40-second raps for 50 years. It's just not an acquired talent that I have.
Well, your talent is doing 45-second reports that include everything in it. That's something Ray probably can't do. Go ahead.
It was fun. It was fun, and I put together half a dozen projects on people like the first Mayor Daley and the second Mayor Daley and Blagojevich and Rostenkowski, which are 20, 40-minute documentaries. I was able to do that with all of the best tape, being the guy who saved all that tape all over those years.
Such a gold mine. Well, Johnson's first 100 days, in your mind, pretty stock. Any surprises?
Well, I think it's too soon to say a lot, but it was unseemly the way he dealt with dropping the really competent Public Health Commissioner, Dr. Allison Arwady. But the Larry Snelling appointment for police superintendent, really spot on. But I get the feeling that it's going to take a while for him to learn city government. Paul would have been a much better mayor just from the point of view that he worked in it for so many decades and knew how it works. We got to give the new guys some time to, not only measure the windows for drapes, but understand how the system works.
He seemed to get a little prickly when Mary Ann Ahern pressed him on how involved the CTU is with his administration on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think, and Paul agreed with me on this today, that the union is management now at City Hall and the Board of Education. That, depending upon your point of view, is good or bad. But if he got prickly about it, he may be, a little afraid that people are going to be judging the union being in charge more than him being in charge. And so that's why he may have a reaction like that. But they're promising him to me for next week's show, and I'll ask him about it.
Good. That'd be great. I'd like to hear that. Yeah, and if you want we have the Mary Ann Ahern excerpts. I've used so much of your audio, I should pay you back once in a while.
You're welcome to it. I'm glad it's in circulation.
All right, well, if you want you had a record album out. I have a copy of it someplace.
Yeah, the record album was of the first Mayor Daley on the Record.
Yeah.
And the second project was Mayor Daley's Greatest Hits. That was on the Mayor Daley II, which is a great comedy album.
Yeah, the album cover artwork is terrific. It's worth the price.
That's
honestly.
right. That's right.
And how many boats and cars and vacation homes have you bought based on the royalties from those albums from years ago?
Not a lot. You know, I gave a portion of it to the Crusade of Mercy when Sis Daly recommended that as the, where I should contribute a portion of the profits. But you don't do it for the money, nor do I even charge for the use of it in licensing fees now. You just do it to try to be the guy who collected the tape and put it in circulation for posterity.
Edited it, yeah. I mean, it's so great. It's just so great. So, well, on behalf of all of us, we really appreciate it. I tell you that often, but I try to give you proper attribution for all these great cuts.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Bill. Have a great weekend, and we'll be listening to Take One, 4 o'clock tomorrow, 4 o'clock Sunday. The podcast is up this afternoon at WSAM.com. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Take care.
You don't prevent it in your business, in the radio. There's a lot of fraud goes on in that. Everyone is human. What the fellow said is about so much is honest and so much is dishonest. The balance would get by with it if they thought they could. So you won't prevent all of this. You do the best you can.
You do the best you can, okay? Progress, not perfection.